Alpha CEO was attacked by 10 men, but the rejected Omega, with hidden skills, saved his life. Cale Thornheart was dying, slowly poisoned by his own board, weakened, and now surrounded by 10 mercenaries in an empty parking lot. The Omega janitor, watching from the shadows, had sworn never to fight again, never to become the weapon they'd forged her to be. But when his blood hit the concrete, Solara remembered what she really was, and 20 seconds later, all 10 killers were on the ground. Let's explore Solara's story, together be part of this journey. By subscribing to Myra's Moon Tales, your support will mean a lot. When you learn that invisibility isn't safety but a cage, the truth arrives too late to save you from what you've become. That's how Solara's story begins. The night her former pack cast her out was the night fairy tales died. Not the human kind. Those had never been hers to believe. But the wolf kind. The ones whispered between Omegas in the dark, that every wolf finds their pack, that mates cherish their own, that strength protects the vulnerable instead of devouring them. She'd believed those lies once. Believed that if she stayed quiet enough, soft enough, invisible enough, she might finally belong somewhere. But invisibility was a treacherous thing, as it turned out. Because when you erase yourself completely, you don't just lose your place in the world, you lose the memory of ever having deserved one. The scent of industrial cleaner burned Solara's nostrils as she pushed her mop across the 73rd floor of Thornheart Tower, her shoulders hunched against the weight of eyes that never truly saw her. The marble beneath her hands gleamed like black glass, polished to a shine she'd never be allowed to walk across with her head held high. Executives in $1,000 suits stepped around her without acknowledgement, their conversations floating over her head as if she were a piece of furniture. Less than furniture. At least the leather chairs in the conference rooms bore the Thornheart crest, a mark of belonging. Solara bore only the faint scar on her shoulder where her last pack had branded her. Defect. Omega. The voice came from behind her, sharp and cold as a blade between the ribs. She didn't flinch. She'd learned not to. Margaret Chin, the facilities supervisor, stood with her arms crossed, her beta wolf radiating contempt through the fluorescent-lit hallway. You missed a spot. 3rd time this week. Solara's eyes tracked to the floor. There was no spot. There never was. Yes, ma'am, she whispered, the only safe response. Pathetic, Margaret muttered, loud enough to ensure Solara heard. No wonder your pack threw you out. The words landed where they always did, in the hollow space where her wolf used to live before Solara had learned to bury it so deep that even she couldn't hear it anymore. She was packless, mateless, worthless. Just another Omega who'd failed at the only things Omegas were supposed to be good for. At least, that's what everyone believed. That's what Solara needed them to believe. The elevator chimed at the end of the hall, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Cale Thornheart stepped into the corridor. Alpha of Alphas. CEO of Thornheart Industries. A wolf so powerful that even other alphas lowered their eyes in his presence. He moved like a predator through still water, silent, controlled, absolutely lethal. His tailored charcoal suit fit him like a second skin, and his steel-gray eyes swept the hallway with the cold precision of someone who missed nothing. Except her. His gaze passed over Solara as if she were part of the wallpaper, another fixture in his empire too insignificant to register. She kept her eyes down, her breath shallow, every muscle locked in the practiced stillness of prey that knows the hunter isn't interested. But as he passed within 3 feet of her, something flickered. His wolf surged. Just for a heartbeat. Solara felt it, a crack in his aura, a tremor beneath the absolute control. His step stuttered, almost imperceptibly, and his jaw tightened. Then it was gone. Cale Thornheart continued down the hall as if nothing had happened, his footsteps echoing like a death knell against the marble. Solara released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. He's weakening. The thought came unbidden, edged with a kind of instinct she'd spent 6 years trying to suppress. The kind of awareness that had been beaten into her in a place she'd sworn never to think about again. Not your problem, she told herself. Not your world. Not your fight. She returned to her mop, to her invisibility, to the lie of safety she'd wrapped around herself like a threadbare blanket. But as she worked, she couldn't shake the sensation crawling up her spine, the same sensation that used to save her life in the gloom den. The feeling that something was coming, and it was already too late to run. That night, as Solara emptied trash bins on the executive level long after the offices had emptied, she heard voices drifting from the conference room at the end of the hall. Low, tense, angry. She should have kept walking, should have disappeared like she always did. But her feet stopped. Her training stopped them. The Alpha CEO won't survive tonight. A voice hissed through the cracked door. Solara's blood turned to ice. 10 men. Midnight. Underground lot. No witnesses. The mop handle slipped from her fingers and clattered against the floor. The voices inside went silent. Solara ran. Cale Thornhart stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office on the 98th floor, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered with blood and precision. But conquest meant nothing if you were dying from the inside out. He pressed his palm against the glass, forcing his breathing to steady. In, out, in, out. Each breath shorter than it should be, each inhale scraping against his lungs like broken glass. Not now. Not yet. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jaw, steel gray eyes, the kind of face that made enemies think twice. He looked like an alpha at the height of his power. He looked like a liar. Behind him, his wolf paced restlessly, snarling at shadows that weren't there. Once, his wolf had been an extension of his will, absolute, unshakable, a force that could dominate entire rooms with a single surge of power. Now it stumbled, flickered, weakened. Cale's hand curled into a fist against the glass. 3 months ago, he'd begun noticing the symptoms. A delayed healing after a sparring match. Blurred vision during a board meeting. A tremor in his hand that lasted 3 seconds too long. At first, he dismissed it as stress. The weight of running 5 corporate packs, of holding an empire together through sheer force of will. But alphas didn't weaken from stress. They broke others instead. 2 months ago, he'd hired a private physician, a disgraced pack doctor who owed him enough favors to keep silent. The blood tests came back inconclusive, but the doctor's eyes had told Cale everything he needed to know. Poison. Slow-acting. Designed to look like natural degradation. Someone wanted him dead, and they wanted it to look like his wolf had simply failed. Cale turned from the window, his gaze sweeping across his office. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, walls lined with awards and acquisitions. Symbols of dominance. Proof that he'd clawed his way to the top and held it against every challenger. But dominance was a performance, and the audience was full of wolves sharpening their knives. His desk phone buzzed. Mr. Thornhart. His assistant's voice filtered through, crisp and efficient. The board members have confirmed for tonight's meeting. 11:30 p.m. Underground lot, level B3. Confirmed, Cale said, his voice betraying nothing. He ended the call and leaned back against his desk, closing his eyes. The meeting was a trap. He knew it. His wolf knew it. But he needed proof. He needed the traitors to show their hand before he could rip it off. For weeks, he'd been tracking financial discrepancies, shell companies' offshore accounts, embezzled funds flowing through his own corporation like poison through veins. The numbers led back to his vice president, Marcus Hale, and at least 3 other board members. They weren't just stealing. They were positioning, waiting for Cale's wolf to collapse completely so they could claim the throne without a fight. Tonight, he'd scheduled a private meeting under the guise of reviewing sensitive documents. He'd told Marcus he had evidence, told him to bring the others. If they came armed with lawyers, Cale would know he was wrong. If they came armed with killers, his wolf snarled, a weak, rasping sound that made Cale's chest tighten. I won't go down without a fight. Even if his wolf was dying, even if the poison had stripped him of half his strength, he was still Cale Thornhart. Still an alpha. Still dangerous. He pushed off the desk and moved to the hidden safe behind the abstract painting on the east wall. Inside, A handgun loaded with silver bullets, a knife with a wolfsbane-edged blade, and a flash drive containing every piece of evidence he compiled. Cale pocketed the drive and the knife, left the gun. If he brought a gun to a meeting with his own board, it would signal distrust, weakness. And weakness was blood in the water. He checked his watch. 11 p.m. 30 minutes. His wolf stirred, hackles raised, instinct screaming. Danger. Trap. Turn back. But Cale silenced it with the cold logic that had kept him alive this long. I know, he murmured into the empty office. But we're out of time. Cale descended through the private elevator, his reflection flickering in the polished steel doors. The elevator dropped floor by floor, the numbers ticking down like a countdown. 98, 75, 50, 25. His heart rate should have been steady. It wasn't. His breathing should have been calm. It wasn't. The poison was worse tonight. He could feel it creeping through his veins like ice, numbing his senses, dulling the edge that had kept him alive in a world designed to devour the weak. The elevator chimed softly. B3. Underground parking. The doors slid open. Cale stepped into the cold, fluorescent-lit expanse of concrete pillars and shadows. His footsteps echoed in the silence, sharp and rhythmic. The parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a few scattered vehicles and the hum of ventilation systems. He walked toward the center of the lot, where a single black sedan was parked under a flickering light. Marcus Hale leaned against the hood, arms crossed, his beta wolf radiating false calm.
Cale.
Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You said you had something to show me. I do. Cale stopped 10 feet away, his posture relaxed, but his senses screaming. Where are the others? They're coming. That's when Cale heard it. Footsteps. Not from one direction. From 10. His wolf surged in warning, but the poison dragged it back down, smothering the instinct to shift, to fight, to run. Cale turned slowly. Shadows peeled away from the concrete pillars, 10 figures dressed in black tactical gear, faces obscured, weapons glinting in the harsh light. Not corporate security. Mercenaries. Marcus pushed off the sedan, his smile widening. You were right, Cale. There is a traitor on the board. Just one. Cale's voice was ice. Several, actually. Marcus gestured to the approaching figures. But you won't be around to expose us. Cale's hand moved to the knife at his side. 10 armed mercenaries. A wolf weakened by poison. No backup. No escape. His wolf snarled weakly, trying to rise. Not like this. Not cornered like prey. The mercenaries closed in, forming a tightening circle. Cale calculated his odds. They weren't good, but he'd survived worse. Hadn't he? Steel flashed in the fluorescent light. Cale's muscles coiled. And then, a shadow dropped from the upper level. Silent. Fluid. Lethal. One of the mercenaries collapsed before anyone realized what had happened. Cale's eyes widened. Standing between him and the remaining 9 killers was a figure he'd walked past 100 times without truly seeing. The Omega janitor. Solara Wynn. Her eyes met his, no longer meek, no longer invisible.
Cold. Deadly. Alive.
Get behind me, she said quietly. And for the first time in his life, Cale Thornheart obeyed. Hey, beautiful listener. If you're feeling Solara's pain, if Cale's struggle is keeping you up at night, if you need to know what happens next, please hit that subscribe button. These characters live because you give them life. Your support means everything. Let's finish this journey together. Broken Heart. 3 hours earlier. Solara's hands trembled as she scrubbed the executive bathroom sink on the 73rd floor, the chemical smell of bleach stinging her nostrils. She'd been trying to convince herself for the past 2 hours that what she'd overheard wasn't real. The Alpha CEO won't survive tonight. 10 men. Midnight. Underground lot. No witnesses. The voices replayed in her mind like a death sentence she had no business preventing. Not your problem. Not your fight. She'd spent 6 years building a life of deliberate insignificance. 6 years hiding every skill, every instinct, every dangerous part of herself that the gloom den had carved into her bones. 6 years pretending she was nothing. Because nothing could be used as a weapon. Nothing could be forced to kill. Solara dropped the sponge into the sink and gripped the porcelain edge, staring at her reflection in the spotless mirror. Hollow eyes.
Gaunt cheeks.
The face of someone who'd learned to survive by erasing herself. Let him die, the logical part of her whispered. He's never even looked at you. You're invisible to him. You owe him nothing. But the other part, the part she'd tried to bury beneath layers of silence and submission, remembered what it felt like to stand by and do nothing. I remembered the screams. I remembered the blood. Remembered the night she'd watched the Gloom Den murder a terrified Omega girl who'd tried to escape, and Solara had been too weak, too broken to intervene. She'd promised herself that night, never again. Even if it cost her everything. Even if it exposed her. Even if it destroyed the fragile safety she'd built. Solara closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, past the fear, past the trauma, to the place where her wolf waited.
Sealed. Silent. Sleeping.
Not tonight, she told me. I can't let you out. Not yet. But I need your strength. The wolf stirred, just slightly, lending her a fraction of its awareness. Her senses sharpened. She could hear conversations 3 floors down. Smell the gun oil on the security guard's holster 2 hallways over. Feel the vibration of footsteps moving through the building's skeleton. And beneath it all, the steady, weakening rhythm of an alpha's heartbeat descending toward the underground lot.
Kale.
Solara grabbed her cleaning cart and moved toward the service elevator with practiced efficiency, her heart pounding against her ribs. She told herself she was just going to observe, just going to make sure. She told herself she wouldn't get involved. But the knife she'd taped beneath the cleaning cart's lower shelf 3 years ago, just in case, felt heavier than it should. 11:27 p.m., service corridor, B2 level. Solara abandoned her cart in the service corridor and moved through the shadows like water, her footsteps silent against the concrete. She'd memorized every corner of this building over the past 2 years. Every camera blind spot. Every ventilation shaft. Every exit. Survival required knowledge. And knowledge required attention to details everyone else ignored. She reached the upper walkway overlooking the B3 parking level and crouched behind a support beam, her breathing controlled, her body coiled tight. Below, Cale Thornhart stood in a pool of flickering fluorescent light, facing a black sedan. Marcus Hale, the VP she'd seen a dozen times, always smiling, always charming, leaned against the hood with the casual arrogance of a man who'd already won. Solara's instinct screamed. Trap. Ambush.
Death.
She scanned the parking lot, her enhanced senses cataloging threats. 10 heat signatures hiding behind concrete pillars. Tactical gear. Military-grade weapons. Coordinated positions designed to create a kill box with no escape. Cale was walking into a slaughter.
And he knew it.
She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his hand hovered near his side, the slight hesitation in his step. He's already dying, Solara realized with cold clarity. His wolf is compromised. He can't fight his way out. Her fingers brushed the hilt of the knife strapped to her thigh beneath her janitorial uniform. Walk away. This isn't your war. But her body was already moving, already calculating angles and strike points with the brutal efficiency the Gloom Den had drilled into her muscle memory. She watched Marcus smile. Watched the 10 mercenaries emerge from the shadows. Watched Cale's hand move to his knife, his wolf surging weakly, uselessly. Steel flashed. The circle tightened. Cale was surrounded. Outmatched.
Dying.
Solara closed her eyes and whispered the words she'd sworn she'd never speak again. Forgive me. Then she dropped from the upper level. Silent.
Deadly.
Inevitable. Her feet hit the concrete without sound, her body absorbing the impact with practiced ease. The nearest mercenary didn't even see her coming. She struck the pressure point behind his knee, drove her elbow into his temple, and caught his body before it hit the ground, lowering it silently. 1 down. 9 to go. The others turned, confusion rippling through their formation. Kale's eyes found hers across the parking lot. Wide, shocked, uncomprehending. For 3 seconds, time suspended. Solara Wynn, the invisible Omega janitor, stood in the center of a kill zone wearing a stained uniform and holding a knife that had tasted blood in 17 countries. The mercenaries processed the threat assessment. Small. Female. Omega. Unarmed except for a single blade. Negligible. They made their first mistake. They dismissed her. Their second mistake was turning their backs on her to refocus on Kale. Solara moved. Not like a frightened Omega. Not like a victim. Like the weapon she'd been forged to become. She crossed 15 feet in 2 seconds, her blade finding the gap between the second mercenary's body armor and his spine. Not to kill, but to disable. He collapsed, paralyzed. The others finally understood. 8 mercenaries turned toward her as one, weapons rising. Marcus Hale's confident smile vanished. Cale Thornhart stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. And Solara felt the chains she'd wrapped around her true self begin to shatter. I'm sorry, she thought, to the girl she'd tried to become. But tonight, I have to remember what I am. The mercenaries charged. Solara's wolf howled behind its heel. And the parking lot became a battlefield. The first mercenary came at Solara with a combat knife aimed at her throat. She didn't block. She redirected. Her hand caught his wrist mid-strike, twisted with surgical precision, and used his own momentum to drive him face-first into the concrete pillar behind her. Bone cracked. He didn't get up. 2 down. 8 remaining. The others adjusted their strategy, circling her with the coordinated precision of trained killers who'd finally recognized a legitimate threat. Solara's breathing remained steady, her heart rate controlled. The Gloom Den had taught her many things, but the most important lesson was this. Fear is a choice. And tonight she chose ice. 2 mercenaries rushed her simultaneously from opposite sides, a classic pincer attack designed to overwhelm. Solara dropped low, sweeping the legs out from under the one on her left, while her knife found the pressure point behind the right one's knee. He collapsed mid-stride, his leg temporarily paralyzed. She rolled, came up behind the fallen mercenary on her left, and struck the nerve cluster at the base of his skull. He went limp.
4 down.
6 to go. What the hell is she? One of the remaining mercenaries hissed. Marcus Hale's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with panic. I don't care what she is, kill her. 3 mercenaries opened fire. Solara was already moving. She'd calculated their firing angles the moment their fingers tensed on the triggers. Bullets sparked against concrete where she'd been a heartbeat before, her body flowing through the spaces between trajectories like water through cracks. The Gloom Den had trained her in something they called shadow threading, the art of making yourself impossible to hit by reading micro-expressions, breathing patterns, and muscle tension. It required absolute focus, complete environmental awareness, and the willingness to become something more than human, even without shifting. Solara closed the distance to the nearest shooter in 3 strides. She struck his wrist, forcing the gun toward the ceiling. Her elbow drove into his solar plexus, collapsing his diaphragm. As he gasped for air, she swept his feet and used his falling body as a shield against the other 2 shooters. Their bullets hit their own teammate. Solara released the body and surged forward, her knife a silver blur. She disabled the 4th mercenary's shooting hand with a precise cut across the tendons, then delivered a palm strike to his temple that sent him spinning into unconsciousness. 5 down. 5 to go. Cale Thornhart stood frozen against the black sedan, his steel-gray eyes tracking every move she made with an expression caught between horror and awe. She'd forgotten he was watching. Forgotten everything except the dance of violence she'd sworn never to perform again. The remaining 5 mercenaries abandoned their weapons and rushed her as one, attempting to overwhelm her through sheer numbers and close-quarters combat. It was exactly what Solara had been trained to counter. She became a whirlwind. Her knife found gaps in armor, weak points in defenses. She struck with elbows, knees, the edge of her palm. Every movement economy and precision, no wasted energy, no hesitation. The 6th mercenary grabbed her from behind, trying to lock her in a chokehold. Solara drove her head backward into his nose, shattered it, then flipped him over her shoulder using his own grip against him. He hit the ground hard enough to crack concrete.
6 down.
4 remaining. The 7th came at her with a retractable baton. Solara caught it mid-swing, twisted it from his grip, and used it to sweep his legs before delivering a disabling strike to his shoulder that dislocated the joint. He screamed. She silenced him with a pressure point strike that induced unconsciousness. 7 down. 3 to go. The final 3 hesitated, their confidence shattered, their tactical advantage dissolved. They'd been hired to kill a weakened alpha, not to face whatever Solara had become. Fall back, one of them shouted. But Solara was already moving. She disabled the 8th with a nerve strike to the neck, paralyzed the 9th with a perfectly placed kick to the spine, and faced the 10th, the largest of them all, with blood trickling from a cut on her cheek, and her breathing finally starting to show strain. The 10th mercenary was smart enough to be terrified. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Please. Solara's eyes were empty of mercy. You came here to kill an alpha, she said quietly. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? She struck him once, a precision blow to the temple that sent him crumpling to the ground. 10 down. 0 remaining. Silence crashed over the parking lot like a physical weight. Solara stood in the center of the carnage, surrounded by unconscious bodies, her chest rising and falling with exertion, her knife still gripped in her hand. Blood, not hers, stained her janitorial uniform. Her carefully constructed invisibility had been incinerated in less than 3 minutes. She turned slowly to face Cale Thornhart. The Alpha CEO stood 20 feet away, his back against the sedan, his expression unreadable. But his eyes saw everything. Saw the deadly precision. Saw the lethal grace. Saw the truth she'd spent 6 years hiding. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Cale pushed off the sedan and took one step toward her. His wolf surged, not in aggression but in recognition. Predator recognizing predator. What are you? His voice was barely a whisper, rough with shock and something that might have been fear. Solara's hand tightened on the knife. She'd saved his life. And in doing so, she'd destroyed her own. Because now he knew. Now, everyone would know. The Gloom Den would find her. The corporate packs would hunt her. She'd become visible in the worst possible way. Someone you were never supposed to see, Solara said, her voice hollow. She dropped the knife. It clattered against the concrete, loud in the suffocating silence. Cale took another step closer, his eyes scanning her face like he was trying to reconcile the invisible janitor with the warrior standing before him. You saved my life. I made a mistake. A mistake? His voice sharpened. You just took down 10 trained mercenaries with your bare hands. I shouldn't have been here. Solara's control cracked. I should have let you die. I should have. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. Solara's enhanced hearing picked up footsteps rushing through the building above them. Security. Witnesses. Cameras. Too many eyes. She turned to run. Cale's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His grip was firm but not painful, his touch sending an electric jolt through her sealed wolf. Don't, he said, his voice low and commanding. Don't run. Solara met his eyes, those cold, calculating steel-gray eyes that had never seen her before tonight. You don't understand, she whispered. What I've done if they find me.
Who?
The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights began to flash against the concrete walls. Solara pulled free from his grip with a strength that surprised them both. The people who made me into this, she said. Then she ran. Not toward the exits. Toward the shadows. Toward the ventilation shafts and service corridors only she knew existed. Cale shouted after her, but she was already gone, disappearing into the dark like she'd been trained, like the ghost she'd always been. Behind her, Cale Thornhart stood alone among 10 unconscious mercenaries, his wolf roaring with questions he couldn't answer. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, the Alpha CEO felt something he'd never experienced before. Helplessness. Because the woman who'd saved him had just become the only thing in the world he couldn't command, couldn't control, couldn't understand. And he needed to understand. He needed to find her. Before whoever trained her did. Fire subscribe now or miss what happens when Kale discovers Solara's darkest secret.
Fire.
Solara made it 3 blocks before Kale Thornheart found her. She disappeared into the service corridors, navigated through the maintenance tunnels, and emerged 6 streets away from Thornheart Tower with her janitorial uniform abandoned in a dumpster. But she'd underestimated one thing. An alpha's determination when his pride had been shattered. Stop running. His voice cut through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade. Solara froze on the empty sidewalk, her body instinctively assessing escape routes even as exhaustion pulled at her limbs. She turned slowly. Kale stood 20 feet behind her, still wearing his blood-spattered suit, his steel-gray eyes burning with an intensity that made her sealed wolf whimper. "How did you find me?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Your employee file. Your address is on record." He took a step closer. "Did you really think you could just disappear?" "I've been disappearing for 6 years." Solara's hand drifted toward the backup knife strapped to her ankle beneath her jeans. "I'm good at it." "Not good enough." "Another step. We need to talk."
No.
"We don't. You just killed." "Disabled," Solara corrected sharply. "I didn't kill anyone. They're all alive. Unconscious. Injured, but alive." Kale's expression flickered with something she couldn't read. "That's supposed to make this better? You took down 10 trained mercenaries like they were nothing. You moved like..." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "What are you?" "I already told you. Someone you were never supposed to see." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Solara turned to walk away. Kale moved with the speed of an alpha, even weakened, and blocked her path. "Move," she said quietly.
No.
"I saved your life tonight. You owe me the courtesy of letting me leave." His eyes narrowed. "Is that what this was? Saving me? Or were you part of the setup?" The accusation hit her like a physical blow. Solara stared at him, genuinely shocked. "You think I was working with them? You appear out of nowhere at the exact moment of an ambush. You have military-grade combat skills no Omega should possess. You've been working in my building for 2 years, invisible, unremarkable." His voice grew colder. "And tonight you just happen to be in the right place at the right time to play hero?" "Play hero?" Solara's control cracked. "I risked everything to save you. I exposed myself, destroyed 6 years of hiding, painted a target on my back, and you think I'm part of the conspiracy? Then explain it." Kale's composure shattered, his alpha dominance rolling off him in waves. "Explain how a packless Omega janitor fights like a trained assassin. Explain why you were there. Explain what you are." Solara's wolf snarled behind its heel, responding to the challenge in his voice. "I'm someone who made the mistake of caring whether you lived or died," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I won't make that mistake again." She moved to step around him. Kale grabbed her arm. It was a reflex. Instinct. The automatic dominance of an alpha used to get answers. It was also the worst thing he could have done. Solara's training took over. In one fluid motion, she twisted out of his grip, swept his legs, and had him on his back against the sidewalk with her knee on his chest and her hand at his throat. They both froze. Kale stared up at her, shock and something darker flickering in his eyes. Solara stared down at him, horror flooding through her at what she'd just done. "I just attacked an alpha CEO." Her hand trembled against his throat. "Don't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't ever grab me like that." She released him and stumbled backward, her carefully controlled walls crumbling. Kale rose slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Who hurt you?" His voice had changed, softer, almost gentle. The question destroyed her. Because in 6 years, no one had ever asked. No one had ever cared. "Everyone," Solara said simply. "Everyone hurt me." She turned and ran. This time, Kale didn't follow. Solara's apartment, 4:47 a.m. The apartment was exactly what someone would expect from a packless Omega working minimum wage. A fourth-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned, a single room with a hot plate and a mattress on the floor, walls so thin she could hear her neighbors breathing. It was small.
Broken.
Safe. Or it had been. Solara collapsed against the door the moment she locked it, her entire body shaking with delayed shock. What have I done? She'd saved Cale Thornhart's life. She'd revealed her skills. She'd assaulted an alpha. The Gloom Den would know by morning. They had eyes everywhere, informants, contacts, surveillance networks that monitored police reports and hospital admissions for anything unusual. 10 mercenaries disabled by a single woman would definitely qualify as unusual. Solara pushed off the door and moved to the single window overlooking the alley. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. She needed to run, pack a bag, drain her savings account, disappear to another city, another identity, another life built on lies. But she was so tired of running. 6 years of hiding. 6 years of being invisible. 6 years of pretending she was weak when every instinct screamed to fight back. And now, Solara's enhanced senses caught it before she saw it. The smell of burning flesh. Her heart stopped. She spun toward her apartment door. There, carved into the wood and still smoking, was a symbol she'd prayed she'd never see again. A serpent devouring its own tail, surrounded by 13 drops of blood. The mark of the Gloom Den. Solara's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, staring at the symbol that had been branded onto every child who survived the training. The symbol she still carried on her left shoulder blade. They found me. Her hands shook as she crawled toward the door, touching the still warm wood with trembling fingers.
How?
She'd been so careful. Changed her name. Suppressed her wolf. Hid her skills. But she'd broken the most important rule tonight. Never be seen. A sound made her freeze.
Tap. Tap. Tap.
Something hitting her window. Solara turned slowly, her wolf howling warnings behind its seal. On the grimy glass, written in what looked like blood, were 3 words. Come home, Shadowborn. The name she'd buried. The name she'd killed to escape. The name that meant she'd never truly been free. Solara's breath came in short, panicked gasps. She scrambled to the window and looked down into the alley. Empty. No one there. But on the fire escape, placed carefully on the rusted metal, was a single black envelope sealed with red wax. Solara knew what it was. A summons. The Gloom Den didn't ask. They commanded. And those who refused, she'd seen what happened to those who refused. Her hand shook as she opened the window and retrieved the envelope, the wax seal bearing the same serpent symbol. Inside was a single card. You belong to us, Shadowborn. You always have. Midnight. The old chapel. Come alone. Or we take the Alpha instead. The card slipped from Solara's fingers. They knew about Cale. They knew she'd saved him. And now they'd use him to drag her back. Solara looked at the symbol burned into her door, at the message written in blood on her window, at the summons lying on her floor. 6 years of running. 6 years of hiding. And in one night, it had all fallen apart. Because she'd made the fatal mistake of caring whether someone lived or died. Outside her window, the sun rose over a city that didn't know a war was about to begin. And Solara Wynn, once known as Shadowborn, the Gloom Den's most promising weapon, realized she had only 2 choices. Surrender to the monsters who made her, or become the monster they feared. 15 years ago, the Gloom Den. The first thing they taught Solara was that her name didn't matter. She was 8 years old when the rogues found her wandering through the forest, her parents' bodies still warm behind her, killed by a pack dispute she'd been too young to understand. The man with scarred hands and empty eyes had looked down at her and smiled. You're alone now, little wolf. But we can give you a family. We can give you purpose. She believed him. Mistake number 1. The Gloom Den didn't want children. They wanted weapons. They took her to a compound buried deep in the mountains where the sun never fully reached. 23 other children lived there, all orphaned, all broken, all desperate for belonging. Your old life is dead, the scarred man told them on the first day. Your old names are dead. Here, you earn your identity through blood. They trained from dawn until collapse. Combat. Weapons. Poisons. Pressure points. How to kill silently. How to kill efficiently. How to kill without remorse. Children who failed disappeared. Children who hesitated were punished. Children who cried learned to stop. Solara learned faster than most. By age 12, she could disable a grown man in 4 seconds. By age 14, she'd been given her operational name, Shadowborn. By age 15, she understood what they were truly training her for. Alphas, the scarred man explained, his breath reeking of whiskey and death, are the pillars of pack society. Remove the pillar, and everything collapses. You, Shadowborn, were born to be the blade that cuts down kings. She'd been genetically tested, analyzed. Her Omega biology made her underestimated, overlooked, invisible, perfect for assassination. They'd planned to send her out at 16 to infiltrate an Alpha's pack, gain his trust, and kill him in his sleep. But the night before her first mission, Solara had discovered the truth. The Gloom Den didn't just train assassins. They sold them. To the highest bidder. To corrupt corporations. To rival packs. To anyone willing to pay for a weapon wrapped in flesh. And once a weapon completed enough missions, once they became too dangerous, too knowledgeable, they were eliminated. Solara had found the disposal records in the compound's basement. Names she recognized. Children she'd trained beside. All marked. Retired. All dead. She'd run that night. Killed 2 handlers who tried to stop her. Escaped into a storm that should have killed her. And swore she'd never be a weapon again. Present day, 7:23 a.m. Solara hadn't slept. She sat on the floor of her apartment, back against the wall, staring at the black envelope and the symbol burned into her door. The memories she'd buried for 6 years clawed their way to the surface, each one sharper than the last. They found me. Her mind raced through possibilities. How long had they been watching? How many operatives were in the city?
What did they want?
That last question had an obvious answer. They wanted her back. And if she refused, they'd hurt everyone she'd. Solara stopped that thought cold. She didn't have anyone. No pack. No family. No friends. She'd made sure of it. Isolation was protection. Except now there was Kale. The Alpha she'd saved. The Alpha who'd looked at her with suspicion and accusation instead of gratitude. The Alpha the Gloom Den would use as leverage. Or we take the Alpha instead. Solara's hands clenched into fists. She could run.
Right now.
Drain her accounts. Disappear. Leave Kale to whatever fate the Gloom Den had planned. He wasn't her responsibility. He'd made it clear what he thought of her. That she was dangerous, suspicious, possibly complicit. But even as the logical arguments lined up in her mind, her wolf stirred behind its seal.
Protect. Save. Fight.
No, Solara whispered to the empty room. He's not mine to protect. A knock on her door made her freeze. 3 sharp raps. Official. Controlled. Not the Gloom Den, they wouldn't knock. Solara rose silently, retrieving the knife from beneath her mattress before approaching the door. Who is it? Kale Thornheart. Her heart stuttered. Go away. Open the door, Solara. You accused me of being a traitor. You interrogated me like a criminal. Why would I open the door? Silence stretched for 3 seconds. Then, because I was wrong. The words hit her harder than any accusation had. Solara's hand hovered over the lock. You're the Alpha CEO of a corporate empire, she said through the door. You don't admit you're wrong. I just did. Against every survival instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Solara unlocked the door. Kale stood in the narrow hallway, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit among the peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights. His eyes immediately tracked to the symbol burned into her door. His expression went deadly cold. How long has that been there? Since I got home. And you're still here? Where else would I go? Kale's gaze moved past her, taking in the barren apartment, The mattress on the floor, the single chair, the complete absence of anything personal. This is where you live. Solara crossed her arms defensively. What do you want, Kale? He stepped inside without invitation, his presence immediately making the small space feel suffocating. I had my security team pull the parking lot footage, he said. All of it, including angles the police don't have access to. Solara's stomach dropped. I watched you, Kale continued, turning to face her. I watched you drop from the upper level. I watched you hesitate before engaging. I watched you pull your strikes. You could have killed every one of those men, but you didn't. So someone working with them wouldn't have hesitated, wouldn't have pulled their strikes, wouldn't have saved my life. He took a step closer. I'm sorry. For accusing you. For questioning your motives. For, his jaw tightened. For being too proud to say thank you. Solara stared at him, searching for deception and finding only raw honesty. Thank you, Kale said quietly. You saved my life. The words broke something inside her. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You shouldn't have come here, she whispered. Why? Solara gestured to the symbol on her door. Because whoever burned that into my door is watching. And now they know you're here. Now they know you matter. Kale's eyes sharpened. Who are they? People I escaped from. People who don't let their property go. Property. His voice went dangerously soft. That's what I was to them. That's what I am to them. Solara moved to the window, staring down at the alley. They trained me, forged me, owned me, and I ran. How long ago? 6 years. And they just found you now?
No.
Solara's voice was hollow. They've probably known where I was for months. But I wasn't worth retrieving until I made myself visible. The parking lot. The parking lot, she confirmed. Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do they want? Solara pulled the black envelope from her pocket and handed it to him. He read the summons, his expression darkening with each word. You're not going. If I don't, they'll come for you. Let them. His wolf surged, filling the room with alpha dominance. I'm not helpless. You're poisoned, Solara said bluntly. Your wolf is dying. You barely survived 10 mercenaries, and you only survived because I intervened. The Gloom Den will send 50, 100, however much it takes. Then we fight them together. There is no we. Solara's voice cracked. There's never been a we for me. Just survival. Just hiding. Just. The window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor as a figure dropped through, landing in a crouch between them. Female, mid-20s, wearing tactical black, eyes empty of everything except cold purpose. Solara recognized her instantly. Raven, she breathed. The assassin smiled. Hello, Shadowborn. The family misses you. Kale moved to intervene. Raven's hand blurred. A knife embedded itself in the wall 3 inches from his head. The Alpha stays out of this, Raven said calmly. Our business is with her. Solara stepped between them, her body instinctively shielding Kale. Raven's smile widened. Still playing hero? They said you'd gone soft. Leave, Raven.
Can't do that.
I have orders. From who? The architect. The name sent ice through Solara's veins. The architect. The Gloom Den's leader. The man with scarred hands who'd found her in the forest 15 years ago. The man she'd nearly killed when she escaped. He wants to see you, Raven continued. Says it's time to come home. Time to remember what you are. I'm not going back. Then we do this the hard way. Raven moved. Solara moved faster. The apartment became a blur of violence. 2 assassins trained by the same monsters, fighting with identical precision. Kale watched, unable to intervene, his weakened wolf useless. Solara and Raven were equals. Every strike countered. Every move was anticipated, until Raven whispered, He knows about the Alpha, Shadowborn. He knows you saved him. And he's very interested in why. Solara's concentration broke for half a second. Raven's blade opened a cut across her ribs. Solara gasped, stumbled back. Kale caught her. Raven stood at the window, silhouetted against the morning light. Midnight. The old chapel. Come alone, or we start killing everyone you've ever looked at twice. Then she dropped through the window and disappeared. Solara collapsed against Kale, blood seeping through her shirt. We need to get you to a hospital, he said urgently. No hospitals. No police. No. She looked up at him, her eyes desperate. You need to leave.
Now.
Before they decide you're worth taking. I'm not leaving you. You don't understand what they are. What they'll do. Kale's arms tightened around her. Then tell me, he said. Tell me everything, and we'll face them together. For the first time in 6 years, Solara stopped running and started fighting back. Dear Story family, you've walked beside Solara through every painful step of her journey. You've seen her broken, seen her fight, seen her try to save someone even when the world taught her she wasn't worth saving. If her story has touched your heart, if you're hoping she finds the strength to face what's coming,
Please subscribe.
your support breathes life into these characters. They need you. I need you. Let's finish this together. Blue Heart. Kale's penthouse was nothing like Solara's apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting. Everything screamed wealth, power, control. Solara sat on his leather couch, her ribs bandaged, wearing one of his shirts that hung past her knees. She felt like an intruder in a world she didn't belong to. Kale stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and commanding as he issued orders to his security team. I want every camera angle from a 3-block radius. I want facial recognition on the woman who attacked us. And I want a full background check on anything connected to an organization called the Gloom Denver. He paused, listening. I don't care if it's classified. Find it. He ended the call and turned to face Solara. Tell me everything, he said. No more deflecting. No more running. If we're going to survive this, I need to know what we're facing. Solara stared down at her bandaged ribs, shame and fear warring inside her. You won't want me here when you know the truth. Try me. She took a shaking breath. The Gloom Den is an assassin collective that's existed for over 50 years. They don't just hire killers, they create them. They take orphaned wolf children and break them down until there's nothing left but obedience and precision. Kale's expression darkened, but he didn't interrupt. I was 8 when they found me, Solara continued, her voice hollow. My parents had been killed in a pack war. I was alone, terrified, vulnerable. And they promised me family, purpose, belonging. How long were you there? 8 years. 8 years of training designed to turn children into weapons. Her hands clenched into fists. They called me Shadowborn. Said my Omega biology made me perfect for infiltration. Alphas would never see me as a threat until it was too late. Kale's jaw tightened. What were you trained to do? Kill alphas, Solara said bluntly. Specifically, the Gloom Den sells its operatives to anyone willing to pay, corporations wanting to eliminate competition, packs wanting to overthrow leaders, anyone with enough money and enough hate. And you escaped. The night before my first mission. I was 16. I discovered they didn't just use us. They disposed of us when we became too experienced, too dangerous, too likely to turn on them. She met his eyes. I killed 2 handlers getting out. I've been hiding ever since. Kale crossed the room and sat beside her, close but not touching. You were a child. I was a weapon.
No.
His voice was firm. You were a child they tried to turn into a weapon. There's a difference. Tears burned in Solara's eyes. Is there?
You saw what I did in that parking lot.
You saw what I'm capable of. I saw you save my life. I saw you pull every strike, so you wouldn't kill. I saw someone who spent 6 years choosing to be better than what they tried to make you. A sob caught in Solara's throat. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever seen her as anything but damaged, dangerous, defective. The architect, the man who runs the Gloom Den, he won't stop, she whispered. He doesn't tolerate defection, doesn't accept failure. If I don't go to that chapel tonight, he'll kill you to force my hand. And if that doesn't work, he'll kill everyone in this building. Everyone on your staff. Everyone who's ever spoken to you. Then we don't give him the chance. Solara looked up sharply. What? Kale's eyes had gone cold and calculating. The Alpha CEO who'd built an empire through strategic ruthlessness. You said they want you at the chapel at midnight. Alone. Yes. Then that's exactly where we'll be. But not alone. And not unprepared. Kale, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He stood, pacing with predatory grace. They're using fear and isolation as weapons. They're counting on you being alone, being afraid, being willing to sacrifice yourself to protect others. Because that's what always works. Not this time. Kale turned to face her. This time, you have something you didn't have before. What? An alpha with resources, a corporate empire, and a very personal reason to want these people destroyed. Solara shook her head. Your wolf is still compromised. The poison is being synthesized by my personal physician as we speak. She's identified the compound, working on a counteragent. That could take days. We have 14 hours. Kale's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression sharpening. My security team found something. The old chapel you were summoned to, it was abandoned 15 years ago after a pack war. No one's owned it since. It's neutral ground, Solara said. The Gloom Den always meets on neutral ground for negotiations. Or executions. The word hung between them. Kale sat back down beside her, and this time he did touch her, his hand covering hers with surprising gentleness. I won't let them take you. You can't stop them. Watch me. His wolf surged, and even weakened by poison, it was still the most powerful thing Solara had ever felt. For the first time in 6 years, she wasn't facing her demons alone. And it terrified her more than any assassin ever had. Because caring about someone meant they could be used against you, meant they could be hurt because of you, meant you had something to lose. Why are you helping me? She whispered. After everything everything I've done. Because you saved me when you had every reason not to. Because you've been alone long enough. And because... Kale's voice softened. Because when I look at you, I don't see a weapon. I see someone who's been fighting her whole life and deserves to finally stop running. Solara's tears finally fell. Kale pulled her against his chest, and she broke. 6 years of fear. 6 years of isolation. 6 years of believing she was too damaged to deserve kindness. It all shattered. She cried into his expensive shirt while he held her steady, his hand stroking her hair with awkward but genuine comfort. We're going to end this, he murmured. Together. Outside the window, the sun climbed higher, counting down the hours until midnight. 6:47 p.m., Thornhart Tower, Security Command Center. Kale's head of security, a grizzled beta named Marcus Chen, spread surveillance photos across the conference table. The chapel is located in the industrial district, abandoned for 15 years, but our satellite imaging shows recent activity. At least 20 heat signatures inside as of 2 hours ago. Solara studied the photos, her tactical mind automatically cataloging entry points and defensive positions. They'll have snipers on the surrounding buildings. Watchers on every approach. The moment I get within 2 blocks, they'll know. Which is why we're not approaching on foot. Kale gestured to another set of blueprints. There's a drainage system that runs beneath the industrial district. Connects to the chapel's foundation. They'll have that covered too. Then we create a distraction. For the next 3 hours, they planned. Kale's resources were staggering. Private security teams, surveillance equipment, weapons, vehicles. Everything Solara had never had access to during her years of hiding. But even with all of it, the odds weren't good. The Gloom Den had 50 years of experience eliminating threats. Kale had 14 hours to prepare for a war. 11 p.m. Solara stood in Kale's armory, strapping weapons to her body with practiced efficiency. Knives, tactical gear, comms equipment. She looked like what she'd always been, a weapon preparing for deployment. Kale entered, wearing body armor beneath his suit, his expression grim. The counteragent is ready. It's not perfect, but it should restore about 60% of my wolf's strength. 60% against the Gloom Den's best operatives isn't enough. It'll have to be. He crossed to her and cupped her face in his hands. Whatever happens tonight, don't sacrifice yourself. Understood? Kale. Promise me, Solara. She met his steel-gray eyes and saw something that made her chest ache.
He cared.
This powerful alpha, who could have anyone, who owed her nothing, actually cared whether she lived or died. I promise, she whispered. It was a lie. Because if it came down to choosing between his life and hers, Solara already knew what she'd choose. Some people were worth saving, even if you weren't one of them. Kale kissed her forehead, gentle and devastating. Let's go to war. 11:47 p.m., 3 blocks from the chapel. They approached through the drainage tunnels, moving in silence. Kale's security team fanned out in defensive positions. Solara's enhanced senses screamed warnings. Too quiet. Too easy. They emerged into the chapel's basement through a rusted grate. Empty. Solara's hand went to her knife. It's a trap. I know, Kale said calmly. Then the lights came on. 50 assassins surrounded them, materializing from shadows like nightmares given form. And standing at the altar, wearing a suit as expensive as Kale's, was the man with scarred hands. The architect smiled. Welcome home, Shadowborn. We've been waiting. 11:48 p.m., the chapel. The architect descended from the altar with measured steps, his scarred hands clasped behind his back like a professor approaching a disappointing student. You've caused me considerable inconvenience, Shadowborn, he said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. 6 years of searching. 6 years of resources wasted. All because you couldn't accept your purpose. Solara positioned herself between him and Kale, her body coiled tight. My purpose isn't yours to define. Isn't it? The architect's smile widened. I found you broken in the woods. I gave you strength.
Skill.
Identity. Everything you are, I created. You created a prisoner. I created perfection. His eyes shifted to Kale. And now I see why you broke protocol. The infamous Alpha CEO. How touching. The weapon fell in love with her target. Kale's wolf surged, fighting against the lingering poison. She's not your weapon anymore. Oh, but she is. She'll always be mine. Just as you, Alpha Thornheart, are about to become a very valuable example. The architect raised his hand. 50 assassins moved as one, weapons drawn, forming an impenetrable circle. Solara's mind raced through scenarios. Even with Kale's security team outside, even with her skills, the odds were impossible. I have a proposition, the architect continued. Shadowborn returns to the Gloom Den willingly, completes one final mission to prove her loyalty, and the Alpha leaves. Refuse, and we paint this chapel with his blood while you watch. Don't, Kale growled. Don't even consider it. Solara's hands trembled. What mission? There's a corporate gala tomorrow night. Thornheart Industries' annual event. 500 guests. 12 rival Alpha CEOs in attendance. The architect's smile turned predatory. You'll kill Kale Thornheart in front of everyone. Prove that sentiment is weakness. Prove that you remember what you are. Horror crashed through Solara.
No.
Then he dies tonight. Slowly. Painfully. And you'll live knowing you could have prevented it. Kale grabbed her arm. Solara, listen to me. I can't let you die. And I can't let you become their slave again. The architect laughed. How noble. How pointless. You have 10 seconds to decide, Shadowborn.
9. 8.
Solara looked at Kale, at the Alpha who'd seen her as more than a weapon, who'd offered partnership instead of pity, who'd walked into a trap to stand beside her. She made her choice. I'll do it. No, Kale roared.
7.
6. The architect counted. On one condition, Solara said quickly. You let him leave.
Now.
Unharmed. You don't touch him, don't follow him, don't go near Thornheart Industries until the gala. The architect considered. Agreed. But Shadowborn, you stay here. Tonight. Insurance. Solara nodded, her heart shattering. Kale's hand tightened on her arm. I won't leave you. You have to. She turned to face him, memorizing every detail. Please, Kale. Trust me. Trust you to sacrifice yourself? Trust me to survive. She pressed something small and metal into his palm, a tracking chip she'd palmed from his armory. I'm not giving up, but I need you alive. I need you to get out of here. The architect gestured. Escort the Alpha out. If he resists, break his legs. For assassins moved toward Kale. His wolf exploded with rage, but the poison dragged it down. He was strong, but not strong enough to fight his way through 50 killers. I will come for you, Kale promised, his voice raw. I will burn this entire organization to the ground. I know. Solara's voice broke. Now go. The assassins forced Kale toward the exit. He fought every step, his eyes locked on Solara until the chapel doors closed behind him. The moment he was gone, Solara's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, her carefully constructed control crumbling. The architect approached, placing a scarred hand on her head like a father blessing a child. Welcome home, Shadowborn. Let's remind you what loyalty means. The next day, 6 p.m., Thornheart Tower. Kale stood in his office, rage and desperation warring inside him as a security team delivered their reports. The tracking chip places her in the industrial district. Same location as the chapel. They haven't moved her. She's been there for 18 hours, Kale said through clenched teeth. What are they doing to her? Marcus Chun hesitated. Sir, our intel on the Gloom Den's method suggests reconditioning, breaking down resistance through psychological and physical trauma. Kale's fist slammed into his desk, cracking the wood. Assemble every security operative we have. Full tactical gear. We're extracting her. Sir, the gala starts in 3 hours. Cancel it. We can't. 12 rival CEOs, 500 guests, media coverage. Canceling now would show weakness. The board would. I don't care about the board, but Solara might. Marcus pulled up surveillance footage on the screen. Sir, look at this. The video showed the chapel's exterior. Solara being escorted to a black van, surrounded by assassins. But as the camera zoomed in, Marcus froze the frame. Solara's hand, positioned at her side, fingers forming a pattern. Tactical sign language. Kale's breath caught. She's communicating. Marcus translated. Attend gala. Trust me. Be ready. She has a plan, Kale breathed. Or they're using her to deliver you into a trap. Kale studied the frozen image, Solara's face blank, controlled, but her eyes were alive. Fighting.
Trust me, she'd said.
Kale had built an empire on trusting no one. But for her, he'd risk everything. We attended the gala, he said. But we prepare for war. 8 p.m., Thornheart Industries Gala, Grand Ballroom. The ballroom glittered with wealth and power. 500 guests in designer clothing. Champagne flowing. Chamber orchestra playing. 12 rival alpha CEOs sizing each other up across the marble floor. Kale stood at the center of it all, wearing a tuxedo and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His security team was positioned throughout the room, armed beneath their formal wear. The counteragent had worked. His wolf was at 75% strength, not perfect, but better than yesterday. He checked his watch. 8:47 p.m. The message had said she'd arrive at 9. The minutes crawled past like hours. 8:52 p.m. The orchestra transitioned to a waltz. 8:56 p.m. Kale's wolf stirred, hackles raised. Danger. 8:59 p.m. The ballroom's massive chandeliers flickered.
Once. Twice.
9 p.m. The lights went out. Screams erupted through the darkness. Then emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the ballroom in blood-red illumination. And standing on the grand staircase, surrounded by 20 Gloom Den assassins, was Solara. She wore black tactical gear and carried 2 knives. Her eyes found Kale across the chaos. Empty.
Cold.
exactly like they'd been in that parking lot before she'd saved his life. The architect's voice boomed through hidden speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a demonstration. Tonight, you'll witness what happens to alphas who believe themselves untouchable. Tonight, Cale Thornhart dies. The assassins fanned out across the ballroom, trapping the guests. Solara descended the stairs with lethal grace, walking straight toward Cale. His security team moved to intercept. Stand down, Cale ordered, his voice carrying despite the chaos. Sir, I said stand down. He stepped forward to meet her in the center of the ballroom, beneath the chandelier that cast blood-red shadows across the marble floor. Solara stopped 10 feet away, knives gripped loosely in her hands. Hello, Cale. Her voice was different. Flat. Mechanical. Everything human stripped away. Solara, he said carefully. Look at me. I am looking at you. Analyzing. Calculating. You're weakened by poison. 75% strength. Predictable attack patterns. Easy target. Is that what they told you? That I'm easy? That's what I observe. Cale's heart shattered. This isn't you. This is exactly what I am. What I've always been. The woman you saw, the janitor who saved you, that was the lie. This is true. She moved. Faster than before.
Deadly.
Her knife slashed toward his throat. Cale blocked, barely, their bodies colliding. Fight it, he growled. I know you're in there. There's nothing to fight. Her knee drove toward his ribs. He caught it, spun her, but she twisted free with inhuman flexibility. They circled each other while 500 people watched in horror. You promised me, Cale said. You promised you wouldn't sacrifice yourself. I lied.
No.
He dropped his defensive stance, arms spread. You're not a liar. You're a survivor. And survivors don't give up. Solara's knife trembled. Just slightly. Kill him, Shadowborn. The architect's voice commanded through the speakers. Prove your loyalty. Her blade rose. Cale didn't move. If this is what you truly want, he said quietly, then do it. But look me in the eyes when you do. Let me see the woman who saved my life become the weapon that ends it. Solara's eyes met his. And Cale saw it.
Tears.
Silent. Desperate. A prisoner screaming behind the bars of reconditioning. I can't, she whispered, so softly only he could hear. I can't be what they want anymore. Even if it kills me. The knife fell from her hand. It clattered against the marble floor like a gunshot. The architect's rage exploded through the speakers. Kill her. Kill them both. The 20 assassins moved as one. Solara's wolf, sealed for so long, finally shattered its chains. Power exploded through the ballroom. Her transformation was unlike anything Cale had ever witnessed, not full shift, but something between, her Omega wolf merging with her human form in a way that made her more
Faster.
Stronger. Deadlier than any assassin the Gloom Den had created. Get the guests out. Cale shouted to his security team. Then he shifted beside her, Alpha and Omega, standing together against the darkness that had tried to destroy them both. The battle began. And this time, Solara wasn't fighting alone. The ballroom had become a battlefield. Glass shattered. Chandeliers swayed. Screams echoed as Cale's security team evacuated 500 panicking guests through emergency exits. And in the center of it all, Solara and Cale fought back-to-back against 20 of the Gloom Den's finest assassins. Solara moved like lightning given form, her partially shifted wolf state granting her speed and strength that made her previous skills look like practice. She was disarmed, disabled, and devastated with a precision born from rage and freedom combined. Never again, she thought with each strike. Never again will I be your weapon. Cale fought beside her with renewed strength, his wolf finally purged of poison, his alpha dominance filling the room like thunder. He protected her flanks, anticipated her movements, matched her rhythm as if they'd been fighting together for years instead of minutes. They weren't just fighting. They were destroyed. One by one, the assassins fell, not dead, but broken, their legendary training no match for two wolves who'd finally found something worth fighting for. Each other. You've witnessed her darkness and her light. You've believed in her when the world didn't. Thank you for being here at the end, or perhaps at her new beginning. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe. There are more stories to tell, more broken souls to heal, more impossible loves to fight for. Stay with me? Within 7 minutes, 18 assassins lay unconscious across the marble floor. Only 2 remained standing. Raven, bleeding from a cut across her shoulder, her empty eyes finally showing something like respect. And the architect, still poised on the grand staircase, his scarred hands clenched into fists. Impossible, he breathed. I created you, Shadowborn. You can't be stronger than your creator. Solara's wolf receded slightly, leaving her in human form but still crackling with power. You didn't create me, she said, her voice steady as steel. You broke a child and tried to rebuild her as a monster. But the girl you broke never stopped fighting. And tonight she wins. She moved up the staircase, each step deliberate. The architect pulled a blade, the same one he'd used to carve the Gloom Den symbol into every child who survived training. If I can't have you as a weapon, he snarled, I'll destroy you as a failure. He lunged. Solara didn't dodge. She caught the blade with her bare hand, her wolf-enhanced strength stopping at mid-strike. Blood dripped from her palm, but her grip never wavered. I'm not your failure, she said quietly. I'm your reckoning. She twisted the blade from his grip, spun, and delivered a devastating strike to his chest that sent him crashing into the wall. The architect slumped to the floor, gasping, his scarred hands trembling.
Defeated. Broken.
Exactly like he'd broken so many children. Kale appeared beside Solara, his hand gentle on her bleeding palm. It's over. She looked down at the man who'd haunted her nightmares for 6 years. You're finished, she told the architect.
The Gloom Den is finished.
Every name, every location, every operation. I remember all of it. And I'm going to make sure the world knows what you are. Police sirens wailed outside. Kale's security team had already contacted federal authorities specializing in wolf-related crimes. The architect would spend the rest of his life in a cell designed to hold monsters. And Solara? Solara was finally free. 3 days later, Thornheart Tower. The aftermath had been chaotic. Federal investigations, media coverage, rival CEOs demanding answers. But Kale had controlled the narrative with ruthless efficiency, framing the gala attack as corporate espionage while quietly feeding authorities everything they needed to dismantle the Gloom Den's entire network. 23 children were rescued from 3 different compounds. 47 assassins arrested. The architect charged with hundreds of counts of kidnapping, child abuse, and murder. And through it all, Solara had given testimony that broke her open and remade her stronger. Now she stood in Kale's office, wearing professional clothing instead of a janitorial uniform, her hands no longer shaking. Kale sat behind his desk, looking every inch the Alpha CEO. But his eyes were soft when they looked at her. The board has been restructured, he said. Marcus Hale and the other traitors have been removed and face criminal charges. The VP position is vacant. Good, Solara said quietly. I'm not offering you a VP. Kale stood, moving around the desk. I'm offering you something different. Chief Security Strategist. You'd oversee all corporate protection, threat assessment, and strategic defense for Thornheart Industries and our allied packs. Solara's breath caught. Kale. You'd have full authority, your own team, a salary that reflects your value, and a position that uses everything you are, not as a weapon, but as a protector. I don't. I've never. She struggled for words. Why? Because you're brilliant. Because you saved my life. Because you survived something that should have destroyed you and came out stronger. He stepped closer. Because you deserve to be seen. Tears burned in Solara's eyes. I've only ever known rejection. Being thrown away. Being told I'm defective, dangerous, worthless. You're not worthless. Kale's hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. You're extraordinary, and it's time you stopped hiding it. What if I fail? What if I'm not? Stay, Kale interrupted, his voice soft but commanding. This time, I choose you. Not as an employee. Not as a convenience. As a partner. As an equal. As someone I trust with my life and my empire. Kale. Her voice broke. Stay, Solara. Choose yourself. Choose the life you deserve instead of the life you've been forced to accept. She looked up at him. This powerful alpha who could have anyone, who'd walked into hell beside her, who'd seen every dark corner of her soul and hadn't flinched. I'm broken, she whispered. So am I. He smiled, sad and beautiful. We can be broken together. For 6 years, Solara had been running. For 6 years, she'd been hiding. For 6 years, she believed she didn't deserve anything more than shadows and survival. But standing in the sunlight streaming through Kale's office windows, held by hands that offered partnership instead of prison, she made a different choice. Yes, she breathed. I'll stay. Kale's smile could have lit the entire city. He pulled her close, and Solara let herself be held, really held, for the first time since she was 8 years old. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. For choosing me when no one else would. Always, Kale promised. I will always choose you. Her wolf, no longer sealed, no longer hidden, sang with joy. And Solara finally understood what it meant to belong somewhere. Not because she was useful. Not because she was obedient. But because she was herself.
Broken. Deadly.
Extraordinary. And finally free. 6 months later, the corporate world whispered. Stories spread through the 5 packs like wildfire. The Alpha CEO who was nearly assassinated by his own board. The rejected Omega janitor who single-handedly saved his life. The woman was deadlier than trained killers who now stood at Kale Thornhart's side, not as a servant, but as his chief security strategist. 2 wolves bound by darkness and destiny. Solara walked through Thornhart Tower, wearing tailored suits and authority-like armor. Employees who'd once looked through her now stepped aside with respect. Rival alphas who dismissed her now watched her with wary calculation. The world that had tried to break her now bent around her strength. She'd built a security division so effective that 3 other corporate packs had requested her consultation. She'd dismantled 2 attempted corporate espionage operations before they'd gotten past the planning stage. She'd proven that being underestimated was the greatest weapon of all. And through it all, Kale stood beside her. Not above her, not controlling her, but with her. Partners in business. Partners in strength. And slowly, carefully, something more. On a crisp autumn evening, they stood together on the balcony of Kale's penthouse, watching the city lights spread beneath them like stars. Do you ever regret it? Kale asked quietly. Saving me that night? Your life would be simpler if you'd walked away. Solara smiled, leaning into his warmth. Simpler isn't always better. And I didn't save you, for simplicity. Why did you save me? She'd asked herself that question 1,000 times over the past 6 months. The answer had finally become clear. Because for the first time in my life, I saw someone worth more than my own safety. And I chose to be brave instead of invisible. Kale's arm tightened around her waist. I'm glad you did. So am I. Below them, the city hummed with life and possibility. Behind them, the penthouse glowed with warmth and belonging. And between them, 2 wolves who'd survived darkness found something neither had believed possible.
Light.
Solara Wynn had once been invisible, a shadow moving through a world that refused to see her. A rejected Omega with no pack, no family, no worth. But tonight, she walked beside the Alpha no one could touch, wearing her scars like badges of honor and her strength like a crown. The world finally saw her. And she was magnificent. Solara's story may be complete, but there are more broken souls waiting for their happily ever after. Subscribe to Journey with Them. Thank you for believing in the invisible ones.